Take a moment to take a deep breath and join me in that grounded state where what sometimes I call the third language can come through to you. It's that state where information can come through between what is audible in my words, the actual words I'm saying, and what your physical ears are hearing. It's that silent place where a deep information that brings total knowing exists and comes through to you. So join me in that place. Now, in episode 2, as you recall, we talked about how our consciousness affects our body, in particular our DNA, and the scientific basis for that. So we thought it was only appropriate that in this episode, we talk about how that same scientific knowledge and history, investigation, can show how our consciousness can not only affect our bodies, but affect everything around us. Plants, animals, people, everything in the world around us. So what would it be like if you could know beyond a reasonable doubt, substantiated by science, that when you executed a spell in the right way, you could put your spell into action, changing the physical world? Now, we know that on some level, but now science supports that. And I believe it turns into an explanation of all magic in scientific terms. But we'll get to that later. Enter the Holographic Universe Principle. Simply put, it's the idea that everything is present in everything else. That from any point or part of anything, you can gain access to the whole. So from any part of the universe, you have the information of the whole universe. Now, this concept has been referred to by many different terms over the years. Most currently, it's referred to as the Holographic Universe Principle. And I'm going to get tired of saying that phrase, so I'm going to call it HUP for short from here on out. Now, this idea existed throughout the centuries in teachings of the mystics and the shamans and even the ancient sacred texts. But now we can substantiate this with scientific calculations, thanks in large part to the work of a scientist called Nassim Haramein, and others, of course, but I'm particularly fond of Nassim. And if you're not familiar with his work, he's an extraordinary man, and I'm happy to introduce his work to you. I find it interesting that, like Einstein, he was not brainwashed by traditional academia, and perhaps because of this, has come up with some of the most provocative thoughts in science of our time, and has been able to publish fully peer-reviewed equations and papers substantiating them. He even looks a bit like Einstein, for those of you who subscribe to the idea that we can carry forward a remembrance of our past lifetimes in our physical appearance. Now, I'm not saying that he is a reincarnation of Einstein, but interesting. Anyway, it is said that Einstein's biggest regret, beyond his involvement in the Manhattan Project, was that on his deathbed he was said to have considered it his greatest failure that he had been unable to find the ultimate solution to his field equation, which would represent a unified field theory. Well, Nassim Haramein has done just that, and ironically, using Einstein's equations as a basis, as a starting point. So actually, Einstein did point to a unified field theory in his field equations when he predicted that black holes could form, that they could exist at all. But he just didn't believe it. He believed that his equation showed it, but he didn't believe that black holes could really exist, in spite of his equations. So he didn't take his equations or his thoughts to their natural progression. If he had, he would have discovered what he'd so longed for. So he just couldn't believe that a mass of something could be so dense and so high that it could create a gravitational field so strong that even light couldn't escape. It was very puzzling to scientists of the time. So he thought he was wrong. Now remember that a black hole wasn't even a word that was being used at that time. It was called a singularity, and one had never been discovered, hadn't been seen or even thought of until Einstein's equations said it should exist. So, but I digress. We're not going to talk about the unified field theory today, although it has powerful implications for magic as well. But we'll talk about the holographic universe principle and how that relates to magic. We'll need to revisit black holes, though, so keep that in mind for later. There are many, many physicists and scientists who attribute to this emerging theory of the holographic universe principle, and we certainly can't attribute to all of them. So just know they're all out there, and it was a massive effort. But many of you know a hologram in terms of a modern-day technology using mirrors and lasers, and it creates a 3D image of something whereby when you cut that image into multiple pieces, every single little piece of that original image, even though it's only a piece of it, contains the data to recreate the entire image, all on its own. So that's what we're talking about. Now, it's important to distinguish that we're not saying, and the theory is not saying, that the universe is a holographic image or a hologram. It's an analogy. It's saying that it has principles of every little piece containing the information of the whole. So we want to make that clear because it's very important to understand that, to understand its usefulness in your magic. Anyway, so focus on the part that is every point contains the whole. Now, unfortunately, we need to cover some background material before we can really get into the meat of how to use it portion. So bear with me because it'll be important to understanding. And belief is part of what helps it work for you, and we need it to work for you. So, like I said, HUP is likely to be correct, and we're giving you all that science so that you will understand why it's so likely to be correct, and how it not only explains all magic, but why you can use it in your daily magical practices with success. So now, back to black holes just for a minute. So why were black holes so puzzling? Well, it comes back to the first law of thermodynamics, which we did discuss a bit in episode 1, and it states that energy cannot be created or destroyed, only change forms. Now, if everything is sucked into a black hole, which was the original thought about black holes, they were just this big black void and everything fell in, and where did it go? Well, without getting too deep into the concept of Hawking's radiation, let's just say that according to the folks like Stephen Hawking, it was just lost, disappeared, gone. But now this created a dilemma because it violates one of the principal foundations of physics. Stuff can't just disappear, right? Not according to the first law of thermodynamics. Big problem developed. This problem developed into what some call the black hole information war. Now, it developed between quantum physicists and cosmologists and various ideas ranging from the information just being lost to the information ending up in a parallel universe, and a wide variety of other options. But the two main players in this were Stephen Hawking, whom you've probably all become familiar with over the years, and a man named Leonard Susskind, who is the director of physics for the Stanford University. Now, I'm going to maybe filter in an image of Susskind here in a minute, and Wow, I'll tell you, he is an intense fellow. In fact, he, between you and I, reminds me a little bit of that evil priest in Lucifer. I wouldn't mess with him, and he ended up proving his point, let's just say. Anyway, the investigation into this war was solved by a combination of scientists and a very convoluted path dating back to some earlier groundwork that was relayed by many scientists, including Bekenstein, who was very, very prominent in that. But it showed that the information that was falling into the black hole was actually being holographically imprinted on the surface of the black hole as Planck fluctuations. So the information was not lost. It was being maintained in every little information particle that is what makes up our universe, a Planck fluctuation. And the calculations were written for this, and when they used those calculations to extrapolate out to other things in the cosmos, they were perfect. They predicted the mass of everything, the diameter, the temperature, all kinds of properties of this black hole that really brought it down to, okay, I give. And even Stephen Hawking eventually conceded to the concept of the holographic universe. So over the years, it's been scrutinized even further to the nth degree, and basically has become embedded into our present understanding of black holes. When that same equation was used to calculate the mass and density and radiuses and temperature and all those things of a proton, an individual proton, physicists found that when the mass of all the little Plancks that make up one proton were calculated, they equal precisely, and I mean precisely, the mass of the entire universe. Wait, let me say that again. Each tiny proton that is contained in every atom of every cell in your body is the exact mass of the universe. Sound a little holographic? Well, yeah, that's what they thought. That's what she said. Well, that means that the information of the entire universe is contained holographically in every proton in your body and every proton in everyone else's body as well. Not only that, the same holographic information relationship between the proton and the universe exists between the electrons in the universe and every other element in the periodic table and the universe. They all match. They all calculated out precisely to those numbers. So everything, everywhere, contains the knowledge of the entire universe. Now, I'm sure you got this, but don't think the entire universe is in every proton, of course. Just the information of the universe that is known or ever been known is in there. Just like when you play a CD of an orchestra, all the actual instruments and the conductor and the live players are not in there, just the information. But you have access to it just the same. Crazy, right? How can all that information, the whole universe, fit into a tiny proton? Well, let's put this in perspective. If we take a bit of information known as a Planck, and at the Planck scale, and we grow it to the size of a grain of sand, then the nucleus of the atom, which includes the proton, would have a diameter about the distance from here, from our sun, to Alpha Centauri. That's 40 trillion kilometers, a distance that would take about 6,300 years to travel, given our current technology. Now, that is a lot of space available in every proton to hold the information of all the universe. at the Planck scale. And that has been discovered by equations and verified by matching cosmological measurements, again, like temperatures and radiuses and mass calculations, and even the forces of the universe match precisely to this same calculation. So, is it real? Well, it's certainly believed to be. That's more detail than we need to know for our purposes. Just know that it's been peer-reviewed, published, and substantiated to the nth degree. Now, the significance of this is that it proves that everything in the universe is connected. That there's a network. There's a network that everything is connected to, and you're connected to it as well. And it's accessible from every particle of every atom in the universe. If that's true, and all the published, verified equations say that it is, then you can access every piece of information that exists in the universe from within your own body. It's in every proton, and there are 100 trillion protons in every cell of your body, which are connected to the 100 trillion atoms in every other person's body. And I know this sounds complicated, and it is, but we don't have to know how electricity works to turn on the light switch, right? Same here. You didn't have to know or understand all these details to make it real. But now that it's been explained, let's move on to the implications of that in magic. Because the reason you've all sat through this brain explosion anyway is to hear that, right? So if we can connect to the information in the proton, we can know about everything in the universe. You can know about people and places you've never seen, places you've never been, and influence things that are far away from you. The concept of HUP explains all the most esoteric experiences people have had throughout time. Simple things like, when you think of someone and they call, or the deja vu experiences we've all had. Even remote viewing, which has been used successfully by militaries worldwide. Astral travel, lucid dreaming, inventors who claim to get ideas while they sleep, dowsing, psychics, and pretty much anything else you can think of. This also means that knowledge and wisdom need not be acquired from outside of yourself, just as the masters have been saying for centuries. This also means that anything you do and anything that you change anywhere is influencing every other thing. So, can you make the moon explode? As some TikTok witches apparently tried to do a while back? Well, there's a scale relationship to that impact. What they believe is that, for instance, our sun has a huge influence over the entire solar system, whereas the planets only have a fraction of the sun's mass, so their influence is less. The sun can affect the atmosphere of a planet, but the other way around, not to such a level, not a significant level. But when we consider the unique power of human consciousness, as shown in the last episode, to be able to impact DNA in just 10 seconds, when studies had shown that the effects of electromagnetism took more than 12 hours to have a similar effect, we begin to better understand the capacity we have to influence the world around us, even though our mass is smaller by comparison to the whole. Our mass, however, is not smaller than the mass of other people, plants, and animals in our world. So especially when we factor in the concept of particle entanglement, which we'll get into in another episode, where we can dive deep into that, using DNA as as witnesses, like hair and fingernails and blood, and the entanglement that pre-exists there. Well, in fact, entanglement is considered that it may have pre-existed in everything, if we buy into the Big Bang Theory and that we all came from one singularity. But okay, another matter. So to all those TikTok witches out there who did recently try to hex the moon, well, good luck with that. But I'm sure there's a calculation for how many insane witches it would take to pull that off. Anyway. But impacting another human, a plant, animal, within our environment is well within the scope of our personal abilities. So now for the juiciest part. How do you do this for yourself? How do you access that particle space inside you that knows all the universe knows? Well, I think it's obvious that we can't access it, at least most people can't, in their standard waking state. If they could, everybody'd be doing it, right? Well, occasionally people do, quite by mistake, but we want to do it intentionally. And we need to be able to access an altered state of consciousness where we can connect to that in a special way. And that has been the mastery of witches forever. Many of you have figured it out already. But now that you know that you're not only accessing that space where magic happens, you're able to access the entire universe. The act of knowing that makes it possible. Just knowing that you need to be in an altered state doesn't give you the capacity to access the entire universe. But knowing you can and knowing how to access that state does. Consider the 4-minute mile. Same concept. Everyone considered the 4-minute mile to be impossible, that the human heart would explode if anyone actually ran fast enough to beat the 4-minute mile mark. But once one person did it, within a couple of weeks, many other people did, because they then believed it was possible. Same goes for you. That's why we went into this kind of detail, so that you would know it's possible, scientifically possible. Okay, so that state where magic happens, if you're already accessing that altered state for your standard magic, then this added awareness, like I said, is enough. You can take it on to the next level. If you have not yet built the muscle memory to drop into that altered state, then you have a bit more work ahead of you. To be effective at this, or any magic for that matter. An in-depth teaching of the various ways of accessing those altered states of brainwave patterns will require far more time than we have today. But we do want to get into them, and we do want to help you find that state for yourself, because it's the basis, the foundation of all effective magical practices. But for now, let's just say that we want to talk about some brainwave states in general. I think probably most of you know that the typical brainwave state we live in day-to-day operation, where we go to work and drive a car and fix dinner and all those things, is called beta. Now, beta waves fall around 12 to 38 hertz. So this is not it, obviously. We'll be doing it all the time. The next level is called alpha, and this registers at around 8 to 12 hertz. This is a relaxed yet focused state that's considered by most to be an optimal state for learning. You can get into this state by listening to Baroque music like Mozart. In fact, sound is a wonderful way to do this, and we'll get into more of that in just a minute. But maybe you can walk in the garden and slip into that state of focused concentration that is alpha. It's a very relaxing and rejuvenating state, but you're awake. Now, as we move lower down the scale, we would drop into theta, which is about 3 to 8 hertz. Maybe you could think of this as daydreaming. But there are other times you drop into theta in your waking day. Let's say you're driving home from work and your mind is off in other places, and all of a sudden you realize that you're home and you really don't know how you got there. You made it safely though, so it's all good and you don't worry too much about it, but that's probably a state of theta where you were daydreaming. You were in that state of theta and your body continued to function as it normally did. It had muscle memory to get you home. Often it occurs in the shower. In fact, many people say they get their best ideas in the shower. That's one of the reasons. It's also one of the most common states for standard meditation. So this is your minimum target state to be able to practice to access the brainwave state that you'll need to get into. And you can still be actively conscious while you do this. No worries. The next state is delta, and that happens at around 0.5 to 3 hertz. This is usually a deep state of sleep, and the brainwave state, if it drops any lower than this, you're pretty much considered dead. So we're going to stop here. So dreams are said to most often occur as sleep cycles as you transition from delta to theta. And I think this is why some of the greatest sparked insights can come, at least the ones you remember, occur after the alarm goes off, but maybe you're just drifting back off to sleep or just coming back awake. You're in what's considered a hypnagogic state that happens between delta and theta. Some of the most innovative greats of our time and before, greats like Einstein and Edison, Nikola Tesla, they all reported to have received their best ideas from this state between wake and sleep. Edison, in fact, was known to crawl under his desk and take a nap up to 3 times a day, hoping to hook a new idea from the universe as he regularly transitioned between this theta and delta state. So there are other states, but this is the important ones for us today. So over the centuries, mystics have told us that to access the information of the universe, we had to learn to meditate, and meditate well. Well, this is a great method, it works, but there are many other methods, and thanks to new brain science and the changing energies of the planet and the universe in general, we have much easier, faster ways to access this state than developing a 20-year meditation practice. So whatever method you choose, again, we're going to help you get into some of those in future episodes, but for today, if you already do this, jump right in with this new knowledge. But whatever method you choose, this is your target state. Now, once you get there and you learn to recognize what that feels like to you, then you can return there more easily. You can even anchor that state in a variety of ways, allowing you to go there instantly, anytime you want. If you have not already developed a recognizable way to access this state, then the fastest, most reliable method I know of is brainwave entrainment using sound. So you remember those brainwave frequencies I mentioned earlier? Choose a music that falls within the pattern of those ranges of hertz frequencies. By playing that music in the background and your intention to be in that state and access that information through the cells of your body to the universe, that's where the magic happens. So that'll give you a starting point, and we will pick this up for you in another episode and take you deeper down the rabbit hole into fast and easy ways to get you where you want to go. In the meantime, obviously, Drakina did not make it to join us today, and she is missed immensely, but it just wasn't possible. I don't want to get into the details of that, but center all your love and energy today. And when you drop in to that place in your body that accesses the universe, send her some love and healing. And we'll see you next week.